The dust cloud appeared on the horizon just after noon, and Nathan Murphy squinted against the harsh Texas sun, watching as the single rider approached his ranch with a determination that made his chest tighten with something he had not felt in years. He set down the fence post he had been working on and wiped his calloused hands on his worn denim pants, his heart beating faster with each passing moment. The letter had arrived 3 months ago, confirming that she would come, but part of him had not believed it would actually happen. Women did not typically choose this hard life willingly, not when there were easier paths back east. Yet here she was, riding across the open prairie toward his modest ranch on the outskirts of Hillsboro, Texas, in the summer of 1882. As the rider drew closer, Nathan could make out more details. The woman sat astride the horse like she had been born in the saddle, not riding side saddle as most proper ladies did. Her dark hair had come loose from whatever arrangement she had started with, streaming behind her in the wind. Even from a distance, he could see the determination in the set of her shoulders, the way she handled the reins with confidence. This was no delicate flower expecting to be coddled and protected from every harsh reality of frontier life. Nathan found himself standing straighter, suddenly aware of the dust coating his clothes, the stubble on his jaw, the calluses on his hands. At 28, he had spent the last 6 years building this ranch from nothing, working from sunup to sundown, eating meals alone, sleeping in an empty bed. The loneliness had become so familiar he had almost stopped noticing it, until the day his neighbor's wife had suggested he might consider finding himself a bride through correspondence. The woman pulled her horse to a stop about 10 feet from where he stood, and for a long moment they simply looked at each other. She was younger than he had expected from her letters, perhaps 22 or 23, with green eyes that seemed to take in everything about him in a single sweeping glance. Dust covered her traveling clothes, and he could see the weariness in the lines around her eyes, but there was no fear there, no hesitation. Nathan Murphy. Her voice was clear and steady, with a slight accent he could not quite place. "Yes, madam, and you must be Lydia Bradford." She nodded, then swung down from the horse with practiced ease before he could move to help her. "I apologize for my appearance. The stagecoach broke an axle about 15 miles back, and I decided I would rather ride than wait another day for repairs. One of the other passengers was kind enough to sell me this horse." Nathan felt a smile tugging at his lips despite his nervousness. Most women would have waited. "I am not most women, Mr. Murphy. I thought I made that clear in my letters." She met his gaze directly, and he saw a flicker of challenge there, as if she was daring him to be disappointed. "You did," he agreed, taking the horse's reins from her, "and I am glad for it. Life out here is not easy." "I did not come looking for easy," Lydia said. She glanced around at the ranch, taking in the small wooden house, the barn that still needed repairs, the corral with his few horses, the vast expanse of open land beyond. "I came looking for honest." Something in Nathan's chest loosened at those words. He had worried during their months of correspondence that he had somehow misrepresented himself, that she would arrive expecting more than he could provide. "Then I hope I can give you that. Would you like to see the house? You must be exhausted from your journey." Lydia followed him toward the modest structure he called home, her steps steady despite what must have been hours in the saddle. As they walked, Nathan found himself acutely aware of her presence beside him, the rustle of her skirts, the scent of horse and dust, and something underneath that might have been lavender. "The house is not much," he said as he opened the door. 2 rooms, a kitchen area, a sleeping area separated by that curtain. "I built it myself 3 years ago with plans to expand it when, well, if circumstances changed." Lydia stepped inside, and Nathan watched her face carefully, trying to read her reaction. The interior was sparse but clean. He had spent the last week scrubbing every surface, making sure everything was as presentable as possible. A simple bed stood in one corner, a table with 2 chairs in the other, a wood-burning stove against the far wall. Windows on both sides let in light, and he had hung curtains just yesterday, the first decorative touch the place had ever known. "It is honest," Lydia said finally, turning to face him, "and it is more than I had in Boston." "You never explained in your letters why you left," Nathan said, then immediately wished he could take the words back. "I am sorry, that is not my business. Not yet, anyway. It will be your business if we marry," Lydia said practically. "I have nothing to hide, Mr. Murphy. I left Boston because my father died 6 months ago, leaving debts I could not hope to repay. My choices were to marry the man who held those debts, a man 3 times my age who already had 2 wives buried, or to find another path. I chose another path." The matter-of-fact way she stated it struck Nathan as both sad and admirable. "I am sorry for your loss, and I am glad you chose this path, though I know I am a stranger to you." "We are both taking a chance," Lydia acknowledged. She moved to the window, looking out at the land beyond. "Your letters were kind. You did not make promises you could not keep, and you did not pretend that life here would be anything other than what it is. That meant something to me." Nathan moved to stand a respectful distance away. "I lost my parents to fever when I was 20. Spent a few years working other people's land before I saved enough to buy this place. It is not much, but it is mine, and I have plans to make it into something substantial. I could use a partner in that, someone who is not afraid of hard work." "I am not afraid of hard work," Lydia said. She turned to face him again, and in the light from the window, he could see the exhaustion in her face more clearly, along with something else, something that looked almost like hope. "But I need to know what you expect from me, Mr. Murphy, what this arrangement truly means." Nathan had been dreading this conversation, but he appreciated her directness. "I expect honesty, which you have already given me. I expect partnership, a true partnership where we both contribute to building this life. As for the rest," he paused, choosing his words carefully, "I know we are strangers. I am in no rush to claim the rights of a husband until you are ready. We can marry for practical purposes and take our time with the rest." Something in Lydia's expression softened. "That is more consideration than I expected." "I want a wife, not a prisoner," Nathan said. "And I want any children we might have someday to be born from something real between us, not just obligation." Lydia was quiet for a long moment, studying him with those sharp green eyes. Finally, she nodded. "Then I believe we can make this work, Mr. Murphy. Nathan, please." "Nathan," she repeated, and the sound of his name in her voice sent an unexpected warmth through him. "And you should call me Lydia." They stood there in the simple room, 2 people who had gambled everything on letters and hope, and Nathan felt the weight of responsibility settle onto his shoulders. This woman had trusted him enough to travel halfway across the country, to put her future in his hands. He would do everything in his power to prove himself worthy of that trust. "Are you hungry? I can make something to eat," he offered. "I would rather clean the dust off first if possible," Lydia said. "Do you have water for washing?" Nathan nodded. "There is a pump outside, and I can heat water on the stove if you want a proper bath. It will take a while, but I imagine after your journey it might be worth the wait." "That would be wonderful," Lydia said, and for the first time since her arrival, he saw her smile. It transformed her face, softening the determined lines, and Nathan felt his heart skip in his chest. He busied himself hauling water and heating it on the stove, trying to give her privacy while also making sure she had everything she needed. Lydia had brought only one small bag with her, which she had retrieved from the horse. As the water heated, she stood outside, tending to the animal she had ridden, checking its hooves and speaking to it in a low, gentle voice. "You know horses," Nathan observed, bringing another bucket of water from the pump. "My father was a farrier before he tried his hand at business," Lydia explained. "I spent my childhood in stables. It was probably not appropriate for a young lady, but my mother died when I was young, and my father did not know what else to do with me. So I learned about horses instead of embroidery." "That will serve you better here than embroidery," Nathan said. He found himself wanting to know more about her, about the life she had left behind, about what had shaped her into this unusual woman who rode horses astride and spoke her mind so directly. By the time the water was hot enough, the sun had begun its descent toward the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. Nathan had set up a screen in the corner of the house, hung a lantern nearby, and laid out clean towels. It was makeshift, but it afforded some privacy. "I will be outside," he told Lydia. "Take your time." He sat on the porch steps as the evening air cooled, listening to the sounds of the ranch settling for the night. His horses moved in the corral, crickets began their evening song, and from inside came the quiet splashing of water. Nathan tried not to think about Lydia bathing, tried not to imagine anything beyond the practical reality of a woman washing away travel dust. They were to be married, yes, but they were still strangers, and he meant what he said about taking their time. When Lydia emerged nearly an hour later, the transformation was remarkable. She had washed and dried her hair, which fell in dark waves past her shoulders. She wore a simple dress, blue cotton with small white flowers, and her face was clean of dust, revealing features that were perhaps not classically beautiful but striking nonetheless. There was character in her face, strength in the line of her jaw, intelligence in her eyes. "Thank you," she said, settling onto the steps beside him, maintaining a proper distance. "I feel human again." "You look well rested," Nathan said, which was a lie since she still had shadows under her eyes. Lydia laughed softly. "I look exhausted, but I appreciate the kindness." "How soon do you want to arrange the marriage?" The circuit preacher comes through Hillsborough every 2 weeks. He was just here 3 days ago, which means we have 11 days to wait, unless you would rather go into town to find someone else. 11 days is fine, Lydia said. It will give us time to know each other a bit better before we make it legal. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the last of the daylight fade. Finally, Nathan stood. "You must be starving. Let me make us something to eat." The meal was simple, bacon and beans with bread he had bought in town, but Lydia ate with genuine appreciation. They talked as they ate, trading stories about their pasts, carefully learning the shape of each other's lives. Nathan told her about his plans for the ranch, about wanting to increase his herd, about the water rights disputes with some of the larger ranchers in the area. Lydia told him about Boston, about the bookshop where she had worked after her father's business failed, about the novels she loved to read. "I did not think to mention it in my letters, but I can read and write well," Lydia said. "I could help with any correspondence or record keeping for the ranch." "That would be useful," Nathan admitted. "My writing is functional but not elegant." As the night deepened, Nathan could see Lydia fighting sleep. "You should rest," he said gently. "You can take the bed, I will sleep outside, or I can make up a bedroll here by the stove." "I cannot take your bed," Lydia protested. "You can and you will," Nathan said firmly, "at least for tonight. We can figure out a better arrangement tomorrow." Lydia looked like she wanted to argue but was too exhausted to manage it. "Thank you, Nathan, for everything today, for being kind." "Get some rest," he said, and tried not to watch as she disappeared behind the curtain that separated the sleeping area. Nathan made himself a bedroll near the stove, but sleep was long in coming. His mind kept replaying the day, the sight of Lydia riding toward him across the prairie, the way she had looked at his modest home without disappointment, the sound of her laugh, the trust she was placing in him. He had never been responsible for another person's happiness before, and the weight of it was both terrifying and exhilarating. The next morning, Nathan woke before dawn, as was his habit. He moved quietly, not wanting to wake Lydia, and went outside to start the day's work. The horses needed tending, fences needed checking, and 100 other tasks awaited his attention. He had been working for about an hour when he heard the door open behind him. Lydia emerged, wearing a simpler dress than yesterday, her hair braided and pinned up. "Good morning. I hope you do not mind I made coffee." "Mind? I am grateful," Nathan said, accepting the cup she offered him. "But you should have slept longer. You must still be exhausted." "I am used to early mornings," Lydia said. She looked around the ranch yard, her gaze assessing. "What needs doing today?" "You are not here to work yourself to death on your first day," Nathan protested. "I am here to be a partner, remember," Lydia said. "So what needs doing?" Nathan found himself listing the tasks ahead of him, and Lydia listened carefully, asking questions about the ranch operations, about the land, about his plans. Her questions were intelligent and practical, and he found himself enjoying the conversation, the chance to share his vision with someone who seemed genuinely interested. "I could help with the horses," Lydia suggested. "You said one of them has been favoring her front leg." Nathan showed her to the corral, where his mare, Daisy, had indeed been limping slightly. He watched as Lydia approached the animal slowly, speaking in that same gentle voice he had heard yesterday. The horse, usually skittish with strangers, allowed Lydia to examine her leg without protest. "There is a stone bruise here," Lydia said after a careful examination. "Not serious, but it needs attention. Do you have a poultice kit?" Nathan retrieved his medical supplies, such as they were, and watched in admiration as Lydia expertly cleaned and treated the injury. Her hands were steady and sure, and she spoke to the horse the entire time, keeping the animal calm. "Where did you learn to do that?" he asked. "My father," Lydia said simply. "He believed horses deserved the same care and respect as any person, maybe more than some people." They worked together through the morning, falling into an easy rhythm that surprised Nathan with its naturalness. Lydia asked before touching anything, sought his direction when she was unsure, but once given a task, she completed it thoroughly and well. By noon, they had accomplished more than Nathan usually managed alone in a full day. Over a simple lunch of bread and cheese, Lydia asked, "Tell me about the town, about Hillsborough." "It is small, maybe 300 people," Nathan said. "There is a general store, a saloon, a church when the preacher comes through, a few other businesses. The people are decent mostly, though there are some who think they own the whole territory. The nearest big city is San Antonio, about 2 days' ride south. And your neighbors, your friends." Nathan hesitated. "The nearest ranch is the Prescott place, about 5 miles east. Thomas Prescott and his wife Margaret. They are good people, helped me when I first arrived. Beyond that, most of the ranchers keep to themselves unless there is trouble. As for friends, I have acquaintances in town, but I have been too busy building this place to socialize much." "That sounds lonely," Lydia said quietly. "It has been," Nathan admitted. "That is why I answered the advertisement in the first place. I realized I was building something with no one to share it with, and that seemed like a hollow victory." Lydia met his eyes across the table. "I understand that feeling. After my father died, I felt like I was just going through motions, working to pay debts I would never clear, living a life that belonged to someone else's expectations. Coming here, it feels like maybe I can build something that is actually mine. Ours, Nathan corrected gently. If you are willing. Ours, Lydia agreed, and the words seemed to settle something between them. The days that followed fell into a pattern. Nathan and Lydia worked together during the daylight hours, learning each other's rhythms, discovering strengths and covering weaknesses. In the evenings, they talked, trading stories and dreams, slowly building the foundation of something that might become real partnership. Nathan found himself looking forward to these evening conversations more than anything else. Lydia was well-read and thoughtful, with opinions on everything from politics to philosophy. She made him laugh with her dry observations about the absurdities of Boston society, and she listened with genuine interest when he talked about his hopes for the ranch. On the 5th day after her arrival, they rode into Hillsborough together so Lydia could see the town. Nathan watched nervously as she took in the dusty Main Street, the simple buildings, the rough characters lounging outside the saloon. It was a far cry from Boston, and he half expected her to realize what a mistake she had made. Instead, Lydia smiled. "It has character," she said. They stopped at the general store where Nathan introduced Lydia to Walter Harris, the proprietor. Harris was a widower in his 50s, kind but gossip-prone, and Nathan saw the curiosity in his eyes as he took in Lydia's practical dress and direct manner. "A mail-order bride, you say?" Harris said, not bothering to lower his voice. "Well, Nathan, I did not think you had it in you. Most women would not last a week out at your place." "Then it is fortunate I am not most women," Lydia said pleasantly, but with an edge that made Harris blink. "Yes. Well, welcome to Hillsborough, Miss Bradford. We are always happy to have new residents, especially ladies." Brings a civilizing influence to the place. As they left the store with supplies, Lydia said quietly, "He thinks I will not last." "Does that bother you?" Nathan asked. "No," Lydia said, "but it will be satisfying to prove him wrong." They encountered several other townspeople during their visit, and Nathan noticed how Lydia handled each interaction. She was polite but not deferential, friendly but not overly familiar. She asked intelligent questions about the town and its workings, and by the time they left, Nathan could see that she had made an impression. The people of Hillsborough might not know what to make of her yet, but they would remember her. On the ride back to the ranch, Lydia was quiet, and Nathan worried that the reality of her new life was settling in uncomfortably. But when he asked if she was all right, she surprised him. "I was just thinking how different this is from Boston," she said. "How much more real it feels. In the city, everything is about appearances and expectations. Here, things are what they are. It is refreshing." "Even the dust and the heat and the isolation," Nathan asked. "Even those," Lydia confirmed. "At least they are honest inconveniences." That night, as they prepared for bed, Nathan working on ranch accounts at the table while Lydia read by lamplight, something shifted between them. It was subtle, nothing more than a comfortable silence, but Nathan felt it like a physical presence. They were becoming accustomed to each other, starting to fit together like pieces of a puzzle finding their proper places. "6 more days until the preacher comes," Lydia said suddenly, looking up from her book. "Are you having second thoughts?" Nathan asked, his heart clenching at the possibility. "No," Lydia said. She marked her place and set the book aside. "But I think we should talk about expectations. After we marry, I mean. You said you would not rush things, and I appreciate that, but we should be clear about what we both want." Nathan set down his pen. This was the conversation he had been both anticipating and dreading. "What do you want, Lydia?" She was quiet for a moment, choosing her words. "I want a real marriage eventually, a partnership in every sense. But I need time to trust that, to trust you. I need to know that you see me as a person, not just as a means to an end. I do see you, Nathan said earnestly. These past days, working with you, talking with you, I have come to respect you more than I can properly say. You are strong and capable and kind. I would be honored to have you as my wife in truth, but only when you are ready. There is no timeline on that. Lydia's expression softened. What do you want, Nathan? You have not really said. Nathan took a deep breath. I want what I wrote in my letters. A partner to build this life with, someone to share the burdens and the joys. I want children someday if we are blessed with them. I want to build something lasting, something that matters. But more than any of that, I want you to be happy here. I want this to be a choice you never regret. I cannot promise I will never have regrets, Lydia said honestly. But I can promise to try my best to make this work. And I am already happier here than I was in Boston, Nathan. That should tell you something. The night of the wedding arrived faster than Nathan expected. The circuit preacher, a weathered man named Reverend Michaels, had agreed to perform the ceremony at the ranch rather than in town, which suited both Nathan and Lydia. They wanted something simple, private, just the two of them making their vows without the scrutiny of curious townspeople. Nathan had spent the day before riding to the Prescott Ranch to invite his neighbors to witness the ceremony. Thomas and Margaret had been delighted, insisting on bringing food for a small celebration afterward. Their enthusiasm had been touching, and Nathan realized how isolated he had become when the prospect of having friends present felt almost overwhelming. On the morning of the wedding, Nathan woke early as always, but this time with a nervousness that made his hands shake as he shaved. He had only one good suit, bought years ago for his parents' funeral and rarely worn since. It was slightly tight across the shoulders now, evidence of years of hard labor, but it would have to do. Lydia had claimed the house for her own preparations, so Nathan dressed in the barn, checking his appearance in the small mirror he kept there. He looked like a rancher playing at being civilized, but there was nothing to be done about that. This was who he was, and Lydia knew it. When he returned to the house, Lydia was not yet ready, still behind the curtain that divided the sleeping area. Reverend Michaels had arrived, along with the Prescotts, and they all waited somewhat awkwardly in the small space. "She is a pretty thing, your bride," Margaret Prescott whispered to Nathan, "and she has spirit, I can tell. You did well, Nathan Murphy." Before Nathan could respond, Lydia emerged from behind the curtain and his breath caught in his throat. She wore a simple dress, pale green cotton with white lace at the collar and cuffs. Her dark hair was arranged in soft curls, pinned up but with tendrils framing her face. She had no veil, no elaborate decoration, but she was beautiful in a way that made Nathan's heart ache. Their eyes met across the room and Lydia smiled, a genuine warm smile that eased some of Nathan's nervousness. She crossed to stand beside him, and he caught the scent of lavender, realized she must have found some in town for this day. "You look lovely," he whispered. "You look terrified," she whispered back, but her tone was teasing. Reverend Michaels cleared his throat and began the ceremony. Nathan had been to few weddings in his life, and he barely remembered the words being spoken. His entire focus was on Lydia, on the way her hand trembled slightly when he took it, on the steadiness of her voice as she repeated her vows. When it came time for his own vows, Nathan spoke clearly, meaning every word. "I, Nathan Murphy, take you, Lydia Bradford, to be my lawfully wedded wife. I promise to honor you, to respect you, to stand beside you in whatever comes. I promise to build a life with you that is honest and true, and to do my best to make you happy every day we have together." Lydia's eyes were bright with unshed tears as she squeezed his hand. I, Lydia Bradford, take you, Nathan Murphy, to be my lawfully wedded husband. I promise to be your partner in all things, to work beside you, to trust you, and to build this life with you. I promise to face whatever challenges come with courage and honesty. By the power vested in me, I now pronounce you husband and wife, Reverend Michael said. Nathan, you may kiss your bride. Nathan had not thought this part through. He hesitated, suddenly uncertain, but Lydia solved the problem by rising on her toes and pressing a gentle kiss to his lips. It was brief and chaste, but it sent warmth flooding through Nathan's entire body. Margaret Prescott burst into tears of joy, and even Thomas had to clear his throat gruffly. The small group moved outside, where Margaret had laid out food on a table Nathan had dragged from the barn. It was a modest celebration, but Nathan had never been happier. As the afternoon wore on, the Prescotts shared stories about their own early days of marriage, making both Nathan and Lydia laugh with tales of mishaps and misunderstandings. Reverend Michaels regaled them with accounts of the various weddings he had performed across the territory, some touching, some amusing, all uniquely Western. When the sun began to set, their guests took their leave, offering congratulations and well wishes. Nathan and Lydia stood together, watching them ride away, and suddenly they were alone as a married couple for the first time. Well, Lydia said after a long moment, I suppose we should decide on sleeping arrangements. Nathan had been thinking about this all day. I can continue sleeping by the stove, he offered. Nothing has to change until you want it to. Lydia turned to face him, and in the fading light her expression was serious. Nathan, I married you today because I wanted to, not because I had to, not because I had no other choice. Because after these past 11 days, I believe we can build something good together. I am not asking for anything to happen tonight that we are not ready for, but I do not want you sleeping on the floor like a servant. We are married. We can share a bed like adults without it meaning more than we want it to mean. Nathan felt his face heat. I do not want to make you uncomfortable. You will make me more uncomfortable if you insist on martyring yourself, Lydia said practically. The bed is large enough for 2 people to sleep without even touching. We are both exhausted. Let us just rest and worry about the rest another day. So they prepared for bed with careful courtesy, Nathan changing in the barn again, giving Lydia privacy. When he finally joined her, she was already under the covers on one side of the bed, her back turned, breathing steadily. Nathan slipped under the covers on the opposite side, careful to maintain distance between them, and stared up at the ceiling. Nathan. Lydia's voice came softly in the darkness. Yes, thank you for being patient with me and for being kind. Thank you for trusting me enough to come here, Nathan replied. Good night, Lydia. Good night, husband. The words sent a thrill through Nathan, and he lay awake long after Lydia's breathing had evened out into sleep, marveling at how his life had changed in less than 2 weeks. The weeks that followed established new rhythms in their shared life. Nathan and Lydia worked side by side during the days, their partnership growing stronger with each task accomplished. They laughed together when a stubborn cow refused to cooperate, strategized together about improvements to the ranch, and slowly began to build something that felt like home. In town, Lydia's reputation grew. She helped deliver a baby when the doctor was unavailable, drawing on knowledge she had gained from books and common sense. She assisted Walter Harris when his store flooded after a rare rainstorm, organizing a cleanup effort that impressed the townspeople. She was unfailingly polite but refused to be patronized, and gradually, Hillsborough began to accept her as one of their own. Nathan watched all of this with growing pride and something deeper, something that felt dangerously like love. He found himself noticing small things about Lydia. The way she hummed while she cooked, the concentration on her face when she read, the gentleness in her hands when she tended injured animals, the way her whole face lit up when she laughed. One evening, about 6 weeks after the wedding, they sat on the porch watching the sunset. It had become their habit, this quiet time together at the end of each day. Lydia sat close enough that Nathan could feel the warmth of her presence, though they still maintained a careful distance. "I received a letter from Boston today," Lydia said suddenly. "The man I was supposed to marry, the one who held my father's debts, he wrote to say that he has forgiven the debts and wishes me well in my new life." "That is generous of him," Nathan said carefully. "It is suspicious of him," Lydia corrected. "He would not do something like that out of kindness. I think he remarried already, probably found someone with a better dowry and wanted to clear his conscience." She paused. "But I find I do not care about his motives. It means I am truly free. There is nothing tying me to my old life anymore." "How does that feel?" Nathan asked. Lydia was quiet for a long moment. "Liberating, and a little frightening, if I am honest. I built so much of my identity around responsibility and duty and doing what I should. Now I have the freedom to choose what I want, and I am not entirely sure what that is." Nathan turned to look at her. "What do you want right now, in this moment?" Lydia met his gaze, and something shifted in her expression. "I want to stop being so careful all the time. I want to stop treating you like you might break or disappoint me. I want to trust that what we are building here is real." "It is real to me," Nathan said quietly. "These past weeks with you, they have been the happiest of my life. I know we married for practical reasons, but Lydia, I have come to care for you deeply. I look forward to seeing you every morning. I find myself wanting to share every thought with you. I think about your happiness constantly. I think I might be falling in love with you, and I hope that does not frighten you away." Lydia's eyes were bright in the fading light. "It does frighten me a little," she admitted, "but only because I feel the same way and I did not expect to. I thought I would come here and we would be partners, maybe friends eventually. I did not think I would want more than that. But Nathan, I do want more. I want all of it." Nathan reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and cupped her face in his hand. "May I kiss you?" "Really kiss you this time?" In answer, Lydia closed the distance between them, and their lips met in a kiss that was nothing like the chaste peck at their wedding. This kiss was searching and sweet, full of question and answer, full of the weeks of growing tension and affection. When they finally pulled apart, both were breathless. "I think," Lydia said, her voice shaky, "that maybe we have been patient enough." That night, their marriage became real in every sense. Nathan was gentle and careful, constantly checking that Lydia was comfortable, and she was brave and trusting, meeting him with equal passion. Afterwards, they lay tangled together, Lydia's head on Nathan's chest, his arms around her, and Nathan felt a completeness he had never experienced before. "I love you," he whispered into her hair. "I know it is soon, but I do." "I love you too," Lydia replied, and her voice was full of wonder, as if she could not quite believe it herself. "I did not know it could be like this. I thought marriage was just duty and obligation. But this, with you, it feels like choosing joy." As autumn settled over Texas, the ranch prospered under their combined efforts. Nathan's modest herd grew, and Lydia's careful management of their resources meant they had a small surplus for the first time. They worked long days but ended them wrapped in each other's arms, planning for the future. In November, Lydia began to suspect she might be pregnant. She waited a few weeks to be sure before telling Nathan, wanting to be certain before raising his hopes. When she finally told him one morning over breakfast, his reaction was everything she had hoped for. Nathan's face went through several emotions in quick succession: shock, joy, fear, and finally settling on a happiness so pure that Lydia felt tears spring to her eyes. He crossed the room in 2 strides and gathered her into his arms carefully, as if she had suddenly become fragile. "A baby," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "We are going to have a baby." "Are you happy?" Lydia asked, though the answer was obvious. "Happy does not begin to cover it," Nathan said. He pulled back to look at her face, his hands gentle on her shoulders. "Are you? I know this is faster than we planned." "I am terrified and thrilled in equal measure," Lydia admitted. "But yes, I am happy. I want this, Nathan. I want to build a family with you." The pregnancy progressed smoothly through the winter months. Lydia continued to work alongside Nathan as much as she could, though he became increasingly protective, insisting she rest more and do less of the heavy labor. She protested at first but eventually gave in, recognizing that his concern came from love, not from any desire to control her. In February, during a rare snowstorm, Lydia went into labor. Nathan had ridden to fetch Margaret Prescott at the first sign of contractions, and the older woman arrived just as the labor was intensifying. She sent Nathan outside, despite his protests that he wanted to stay, and then coached Lydia through the long hours of delivery. Nathan paced outside in the cold, praying to every deity he could think of, listening to the sounds from inside the house with his heart in his throat. When he finally heard the cry of a newborn baby, he nearly collapsed with relief. Margaret emerged looking tired but pleased. "You have a son, Nathan Murphy. A healthy boy with a good set of lungs. And Lydia did beautifully, though she will want to rest now." Nathan rushed inside to find Lydia propped up in bed, exhausted but smiling, holding a tiny bundle wrapped in blankets. She looked up as he entered, and her smile widened. "Come meet your son," she said softly. Nathan approached almost reverently, looking down at the tiny face barely visible within the blankets. The baby had a shock of dark hair and was scrunching up his face in a way that suggested he might start crying at any moment. He was perfect. "He is beautiful," Nathan whispered. "You are amazing. I cannot believe you did that." "I had some help," Lydia said wryly, but she looked pleased by his praise. "What should we name him?" They had discussed names throughout the pregnancy, never quite settling on anything definite. But looking at his son now, Nathan suddenly knew. "What about James, after my father, James Murphy?" "James," Lydia repeated, testing the name. "I like it. Hello, James. Welcome to your home." The baby chose that moment to open his eyes, which were dark blue and unfocused, and Nathan felt his heart expand in a way he had not known was possible. He had a family now, a real family, built from hope and letters and love that had grown slowly but surely. As spring arrived and James grew from a tiny newborn into a robust infant, Nathan and Lydia settled into the rhythms of parenthood. There were sleepless nights and moments of sheer panic when the baby cried inconsolably, but there were also moments of pure joy. James's first smile, the way he would quiet when Lydia sang to him, the tiny hand that would grip Nathan's finger with surprising strength. One afternoon in May, as Nathan worked on repairs to the barn, a rider approached the ranch. Nathan looked up, shading his eyes against the sun, and felt a flash of concern. The rider wore a badge, and law enforcement showing up at a ranch rarely meant good news. The man dismounted and approached with a neutral expression. "Nathan Murphy. That is me. How can I help you, Sheriff?" "Deputy Sheriff Marcus Kane," the man corrected. "I am looking for a woman named Lydia Bradford. I was told she might be here." Nathan's blood ran cold. "Why are you looking for her?" "That is between me and Miss Bradford," Kane said. "Is she here or not?" "Mrs. Murphy is here," Nathan said firmly, emphasizing the name change. "But before I fetch her, I need to know what this is about. If my wife is in some kind of trouble, I have a right to know." Kane studied Nathan for a long moment, then seemed to reach a decision. "There is no trouble, Mr. Murphy. Or at least, not the kind you are thinking. A man died in Boston a few months back, a wealthy man with no living relatives. It seems he left a will that names Lydia Bradford as a beneficiary. My job is just to confirm her identity and location so the lawyers back east can contact her." Nathan felt some of his tension ease. A beneficiary? Who was this man? Name of Henry Thornton. Mean anything to you? Nathan shook his head, but a voice behind him said, "He was my father's business partner, the man whose debts I thought I inherited." Nathan turned to see Lydia approaching from the house, James held securely in her arms. She looked wary but not frightened, meeting Deputy Kane's gaze directly. "Mrs. Murphy, I presume," Kane said. "You are Lydia Bradford." "I was," Lydia confirmed. "I am Lydia Murphy now. What is this about Mr. Thornton?" Kane repeated what he had told Nathan, and Lydia's expression shifted from wariness to confusion. "That makes no sense." "Mr. Thornton was my father's partner, yes, but when the business failed, he claimed my father had cheated him. He was the one holding the debts, demanding I marry him to settle them. According to the lawyers I spoke with, that was not quite accurate," Kane said. He pulled a letter from his coat pocket. "This explains it better than I can, but the gist is that Thornton felt guilty about his treatment of you after your father's death. He left you a substantial sum of money as restitution." Lydia took the letter with one hand, keeping James secure with the other. She read it quickly, her expression growing more shocked with each line. When she finished, she looked up at Nathan with wide eyes. "It says $50,000, she said faintly. "Nathan, it says he left me $50,000. Nathan felt like the ground had shifted beneath his feet. $50,000 was a fortune, more money than most people saw in a lifetime. It was enough to transform the ranch, to build a proper house, to secure their future beyond anything he had dreamed possible. Deputy Kane cleared his throat. "The lawyers will need confirmation of your identity and your current address. They will handle the rest through correspondence. I have paperwork here that needs your signature." In a daze, Lydia handed James to Nathan and signed the documents Kane provided. The deputy tipped his hat and rode off, leaving Nathan and Lydia standing in the yard, looking at each other in stunned silence. $50,000, Nathan finally said. "Lydia, that is a fortune." "I know," Lydia said. She looked down at the letter again as if expecting the words to have changed. "I do not know what to think. All this time I thought I had escaped poverty and debt. I never imagined anything like this." "What do you want to do?" Nathan asked carefully. He was acutely aware that this money could change everything about their lives, but he did not know if Lydia would want to stay in Texas now that she had other options. Lydia seemed to understand his unspoken worry because she stepped close and took his free hand, the one not supporting James. "I want to invest it in the ranch, in our home. I want to use it to build the life we have been planning. Unless you think that is foolish." Relief flooded through Nathan. "I think that sounds perfect. But Lydia, some of that money should be yours, separate from the ranch. For security, for independence. I do not want you to feel trapped if things ever go wrong between us." "Things are not going to go wrong between us," Lydia said firmly. "But I appreciate the thought. We can set some aside if it makes you feel better. The rest we use together." Over the following months, they made careful plans for how to use the inheritance. They hired workers to help expand the ranch, allowing them to significantly increase their herd. They built a new house, larger and more comfortable, with multiple bedrooms and a proper kitchen. Lydia insisted on including a library room, lined with shelves for the books she planned to collect. They also set money aside for James's future education and made donations to the church and school in Hillsborough. The town began to see the Murphys as benefactors, respected members of the community rather than just another struggling ranch family. But despite the material improvements in their lives, Nathan and Lydia both agreed that the money had not fundamentally changed what mattered most. They still worked side by side each day, still spent evenings together on the porch, still fell asleep in each other's arms. The love between them had not been built on wealth or convenience, and it did not depend on those things now. As James grew from infant to toddler, his personality began to emerge. He was curious and fearless, constantly getting into things he should not, making both his parents laugh and occasionally tear their hair out with frustration. He adored horses and would spend hours watching them if allowed, already showing signs of inheriting his mother's affinity for the animals. When James was 2 years old, Lydia discovered she was pregnant again. This time, the news came with less shock and more simple happiness. They had hoped for more children, wanted James to have siblings, and the timing felt right. Their daughter was born in early spring, during a thunderstorm that rattled the windows of their new house. The labor was faster than it had been with James, and Nathan was allowed to stay this time, holding Lydia's hand through the contractions and being the first after Margaret to hold his daughter. "She is beautiful," he whispered, looking down at the tiny red face. "She looks just like you." "She looks like an angry little potato," Lydia said fondly, exhausted but smiling. "What should we name her?" "I was thinking Catherine, after your mother," Nathan said. "If that would not be too painful for you." Lydia's eyes filled with tears. "I would love that, Catherine Murphy." "Katie for short." As their children grew, Nathan and Lydia's ranch flourished. They had built something substantial, a legacy that would outlast them. But more than the material success, they had built a family filled with love and laughter, honest work and shared dreams. James grew into a responsible young man who loved the ranch as much as his father did. Katie proved to be as strong-willed as her mother, with a sharp mind and an independent streak that both delighted and occasionally exasperated her parents. They had a third child, another son they named Thomas after the neighbor who had been such a good friend, and the house was filled with noise and chaos and joy. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Nathan and Lydia rode out to a hill overlooking their land, leaving the children with the Prescotts for the afternoon. They sat together in the grass, Lydia leaning against Nathan's chest, his arms wrapped around her, looking out at everything they had built. "Do you ever regret it?" Nathan asked. "Coming here, marrying a stranger, giving up your old life?" "Not for a single moment," Lydia said without hesitation. She turned in his arms to look at him. "You gave me everything I did not know I wanted, Nathan. A home, a family, a partnership built on real love and respect. How could I regret that?" "I love you," Nathan said, as he had said countless times over the years. "More today than yesterday, more than I thought possible to love another person." "And I love you," Lydia replied, kissing him softly. "My cowboy who gave me everything." They sat there as the sun began to set, painting the sky in brilliant colors, holding each other and watching over the land that had brought them together. In the distance, they could see their ranch house, smoke rising from the chimney, lights beginning to glow in the windows. It looked warm and welcoming, like a promise kept. Nathan thought back to the day he had first seen Lydia riding across the prairie toward him, dust cloud rising behind her, determination in every line of her body. He had known, even then, that she was worth everything. And she had proved it every day since, with her strength and courage, her kindness and intelligence, her willingness to build this life beside him. "What are you thinking about?" Lydia asked, sensing his reflection. "About the day you arrived," Nathan said. "About how I nearly could not believe you were real, that you had actually come." "I was thinking about that day too," Lydia admitted. "How terrified I was and how determined not to show it. And then I saw you, standing there waiting for me, and something inside me relaxed. You looked exactly like your letters sounded, honest and kind and strong." "I was terrified too," Nathan confessed. "Afraid you would be disappointed, afraid I could not give you the life you deserved." "You gave me better than I deserved," Lydia said. "You gave me a life built on truth and love." "Not everyone gets that." As darkness fell, they rode back to the house together, arriving to find the children had been returned and were waiting somewhat impatiently for their parents. James had made dinner, with Katie's help, and young Thomas had set the table. It was a simple meal but made with love, and the family gathered around the table together, sharing stories about their day. Later, after the children had been put to bed, Nathan and Lydia sat on the porch of their home, continuing the tradition they had started on that first evening together a decade ago. The night was clear and filled with stars, and somewhere in the distance, a coyote called out. "Tell me about the future you see," Lydia said, settling close to Nathan. "Where do you imagine us in another 10 years? Nathan thought about it. "I see James taking over more of the ranch operations, maybe starting his own herd. I see Katie probably running the whole territory if we are not careful, and Thomas finding his own path. I see us with grandchildren someday, watching our legacy continue. But mostly, I see us exactly like this, sitting together at the end of each day, still choosing each other." "That sounds perfect," Lydia said. "That sounds exactly right." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, listening to the night sounds of the Texas prairie. Inside, their children slept safely. Around them, the ranch they had built together stood strong. And between them, the love that had started from letters and hope had grown into something unshakable. Nathan pulled Lydia closer, and she rested her head on his shoulder. "Do you ever think about that first moment you saw me?" she asked. "What went through your head?" "I remember thinking you looked like you belonged here," Nathan said. "Like you had ridden straight out of my dreams and into reality. I remember being terrified and grateful and hopeful all at once." "I remember thinking you looked kind," Lydia said. "Your letters had been kind, but I did not know if that would translate to real life. But when I saw you, I could see it in your face, in the way you held yourself. I think I knew right then that I had made the right choice." "We both did," Nathan said. "We both took a chance on each other." As the years continued to pass, that chance proved to be the best decision either of them had ever made. The ranch continued to prosper, becoming one of the most successful in the region. Their children grew strong and healthy, each developing their own personalities and dreams. James did indeed take over much of the ranch operations, showing a natural aptitude for the work. Katie married a lawyer from San Antonio and became involved in efforts to improve education in the territory. Thomas showed an artistic talent and moved to Austin to study painting, returning home often with new works depicting the beauty of the land he had grown up on. Nathan and Lydia grew older together, silver appearing in their hair, lines forming around their eyes from years of squinting into the sun and smiling at each other. But their love never dimmed. If anything, it grew deeper, richer, more essential with each passing year. On their 25th wedding anniversary, their children organized a celebration at the ranch, inviting friends and neighbors from across the territory. It was a beautiful day in June, and the house and grounds were filled with people who had become their extended family over the years. As Nathan and Lydia danced together under the stars, James stood up to give a toast. He was 30 years old now, with a wife and children of his own, but he still looked up to his parents with the same adoration he had shown as a child. "I want to say something about my parents," James began, his voice carrying across the gathered crowd. "Most people think the story of how they met is romantic, and it is. A mail-order bride riding across the prairie to marry a stranger, building a life together from nothing but hope and hard work. But that is not the romantic part. The romantic part is everything that came after. The way my father still brings my mother coffee every morning, exactly how she likes it. The way my mother still puts notes in my father's saddlebag when he rides out to check the herd. The way they still sit together every evening, talking and laughing like they are the only two people in the world. That is romance. Not the grand gesture, but the daily choice to keep loving each other, to keep building together, to keep being partners in all things." There was not a dry eye in the crowd as James finished his toast, and Nathan felt Lydia's hand tighten in his. They looked at each other, and no words were necessary. Everything James had said was true, and they both knew it. Later, as the party wound down and guests began to depart, Nathan and Lydia found themselves alone on the porch once more, sitting in their favorite spot, looking out at the land they had built their life on. 25 years, Lydia said wonderingly. "How did that happen?" "One day at a time," Nathan replied. "One choice at a time to keep choosing each other." "Do you remember what you said to me on our wedding night?" Lydia asked. "You said you wanted to build something lasting, something that mattered." "I remember," Nathan said. "Well, Cowboy, I think we did it," Lydia said, and her smile was bright and proud. "We built something that will last long after we are gone, not just the ranch, but the family, the love, the legacy." As they sat there in the gathering darkness, surrounded by the evidence of a life well lived, Nathan reflected on how much had changed since that day he first saw a dust cloud on the horizon. He had been lonely then, building something with no one to share it with. Now he was surrounded by love, by family, by everything that truly mattered. Lydia, who had arrived as a stranger desperate for a new start, had become the center of his world, the partner he could not imagine living without. She had been brave enough to take a chance on him, strong enough to build this life beside him, loving enough to make it all worthwhile. "Thank you," Nathan said suddenly. "For what?" Lydia asked, looking up at him. "For riding into my life that day. For taking a chance on me. For building this with me. For loving me even when I did not deserve it. For everything." Lydia reached up to cup his face in her hand, and her eyes were soft with love. "You always deserved it, Nathan Murphy. You were worth everything. You still are." They kissed then, a kiss that held 25 years of love and partnership, of shared joys and weathered sorrows, of dreams realized and new dreams forming. When they pulled apart, both were smiling. The years that followed brought new challenges and new joys. They became grandparents, delighting in spoiling James's children and Katie's when she visited. They weathered droughts and economic downturns, leaning on each other and the strength they had built together. They celebrated Thomas's first major art exhibition and James's expansion of the ranch. They watched as the territory changed and modernized, holding on to the values that had built their life while adapting to new realities. As Nathan approached his 60th birthday, his joints began to ache, and he could not work as long or as hard as he once had. Lydia's hands showed the effects of years of labor, and her steps were slower than they once had been. But their love remained constant, the foundation that held everything else together. One autumn evening, as they sat together watching yet another sunset, Lydia said, "Do you have any regrets? Anything you wish had been different?" Nathan thought about it seriously, considering the question with the weight it deserved. "I regret that we did not have more time," he said finally. "That life goes by so fast. I would like to live these years over again, all of them, exactly as they were. But I do not regret a single choice we made together. Neither do I, Lydia said. She took his hand, her grip still strong despite the arthritis that sometimes plagued her. We built something good, Nathan, something true. Not many people can say that. We built it together, Nathan said. That is what made it possible. They sat in comfortable silence, hands joined, watching the day fade into night. Around them, the ranch continued its eternal rhythms. In the house behind them, the sounds of family echoed. James and his family were visiting for the week, and the laughter of grandchildren filled the rooms that Nathan and Lydia had built together so many years ago. As the stars began to appear in the darkening sky, Nathan pulled Lydia close, and she rested her head on his shoulder as she had done countless times before. They did not need to speak. Everything that needed saying had been said over the years, in words and actions, in choices made and promises kept. The night air was cool and carried the scent of horses and hay, dust and distance, all the smells that had become the fragrance of home. Somewhere in the darkness, an owl called out and one of the horses whinnied in response. The ranch was alive around them, a living testament to everything they had built. I love you, Nathan said, as he had said every day for more than 3 decades. I love you too, Lydia replied, as she had replied every time. My lonely cowboy who turned out to be worth everything. Nathan smiled at the memory of that phrase, at how far they had come from those early uncertain days. He was not lonely anymore, had not been lonely since the day Lydia rode into his life. And she had indeed been worth everything, worth more than he could have imagined when he first placed that advertisement looking for a mail-order bride. As they sat together under the vast Texas sky, surrounded by the fruits of their labor and the evidence of their love, Nathan felt a peace settle over him that was deeper than mere contentment. This was satisfaction, the bone-deep knowledge that he had lived his life well, that he had loved and been loved in return, that he had built something lasting with a woman who had proven to be his perfect match in every way that mattered. The years ahead would bring more changes. Their children would continue to build their own lives and families. The ranch would evolve with the times. Nathan and Lydia would grow older still, eventually slowing down until they were ready to hand over the reins entirely to the next generation. But through it all, they would face it together as they had faced everything since that day Lydia rode into his life on horseback. They would continue to choose each other, day after day, year after year, until the end of their days. And when people asked about the secret to their lasting love, they would say the same thing they had always said: honesty, partnership, and the willingness to keep showing up for each other, no matter what challenges arose. The mail-order bride who had ridden into Nathan's life had become so much more than he ever dreamed possible. She had become his wife, his partner, the mother of his children, his best friend, and the love of his life. And he, the lonely cowboy who had taken a chance on a stranger, had proven himself worthy of that trust every single day. As the moon rose over the Texas prairie, casting silver light across the land they called home, Nathan and Lydia remained on the porch, holding each other close. Tomorrow would bring new work and new joys, new challenges and new moments to treasure. But tonight, they simply existed in the present, grateful for everything they had built together, secure in the knowledge that their love would endure through whatever came next. Their story had started with hope and a handful of letters, with a woman brave enough to ride into the unknown, and a man willing to open his heart to possibility. It had grown into something beautiful and lasting, a testament to the power of partnership and the magic that could happen when two people committed to building a life together with honesty and love. And as they sat together in the darkness, surrounded by the evidence of a life well lived. Both Nathan and Lydia knew with absolute certainty that they would do it all again exactly the same way. Because what they had found together was worth everything, worth every risk and every sacrifice, worth every moment of uncertainty and every leap of faith. The lonely cowboy and the mail-order bride had become simply Nathan and Lydia, husband and wife, partners in all things, bound together by love that had started as a gamble and grown into the surest thing either of them had ever known. And that love would continue, passed down through their children and grandchildren, a legacy that would outlast them both and stand as proof that sometimes taking a chance on a stranger could lead to the greatest love story of all.